Okay. So the independent variable would be SDT motivation types, which influences positive or negative consequences of behavior, which would be the dependent variable. So does anyone have any questions about the highlights? Okay. So what did you guys get for the first question? All right, so this question was a little bit tricky, I'll admit that. So to answer this question, we need to fully understand what self-determination theory is. So as the passage states, the theory suggests that certain motivations will influence behavior. The passage also states that previous studies have found that self-determined motivations lead to positive consequences. In the second half of the passage, they're talking about how a person's affiliation with a group can influence their behavior either positively or negatively, similar to how their motivation types influence their behavior positively or negatively. For example, I go to NYU and let's say our rival school is Columbia. If in some parallel universe, I found out that NYU is ranked below Columbia for the first time, and if I have a self-determined motivation, I will say, oh, Columbia being ranked higher could be due to their amazing faculty and their very smart incoming students. If I had a non-self-determined motivation, I will say, that's crazy. The only way that Columbia could have been ranked higher than NYU is if they bribed the person who created the rankings. So notice how the first response was positive and the second one was negative. So in this experiment, they're assuming that the operational definitions of positive and negative used in the previous SDT studies are the same when measuring consequences from one's social identity. So I drew this diagram on the right to make it a little easier to visualize. So SDT, or different motivation types, can lead to positive or negative consequences. Similarly, social identity, or the attitudes of the college students towards their school and how they identify with their school, can lead to positive or negative consequences. So in summary, positive and negative can mean different things. It can mean increase or decrease, or good/bad. So in this case, positive and negative refer to good and bad changes in behavior. Does that make sense? So the dependent variables here are the changes in behavior, positive or negative. These changes in behavior are determined by your motivation type. Independent variables would be the motivation types. So like the 6 types. No, so the independent variables in this study are the 6 motivation types. 3 of them are self-determined, 3 of the other 3 are non-self-determined. So if I have a type of non-self-determined motivation, then my behavior will be negative, which is the dependent variable. So choice B, let's talk about choice B. The definition of corollary is a direct result. Oh, so operational definition is the function of the, how do I say this? The function of the term. So like I said, positive and negative means good/bad. If the operational definitions were not the same, then positive and negative would mean good/bad in one case. In the other case, it would mean like increase or decrease. So it's how you use the words positive and negative. Does that make sense?
I think operational definition. Hold on, are we talking about operation definition or operation variable?
Operational definition.
Oh, I think operation definition is basically like a way to quantify being very objective about the definition, such as if you are happy, then I will measure your level of dopamine, something like that.
Yeah, I think that's true.
Just to add on your explanation.
Mhm. The differences between variables and definition. What do you mean? I think, wait. Yeah, so what Brian was explaining just now about how, like, if I want to measure your happiness, I would see how much I would measure like your dopamine levels. All right. So choice B, what was I saying? Oh, so choice B is wrong. The definition of corollary is a direct result of something. So for example, high unemployment rates are due to lower budgets in companies. Social identity theory suggests that a person's membership with a group influences their attitudes towards members in the same group or outside of the group. So option B is saying that if the self-determination theory is true, then the social identity theory has to be true as well. But this can't be right because the two theories are different concepts. Social determination theory aims to explain the results due to certain motivation types versus social identity theory addresses the attitudes that people have due to their group identity. So in the experiment in the passage, we're only looking at correlations between different motivation theories and manifestations of social group identity, which encompass the positive/negative consequences. And choice C is also incorrect. The whole point of the study was to determine if different motivation types predict positive or negative consequences of social identity. Identity strength and quality of identification are not motivation types under SDT, self-determination theory. So they cannot predict consequences of social identity. Also, the passage stated that the positive consequences of social identity include psychological well-being and identity quality, not identity strength. And finally, option D is incorrect because this is the researcher's hypothesis. They're trying to see if dimensions of self-determination theory predict social identity consequences. This is not an assumption that the question STEM is asking for. It's a question that the researchers are trying to answer. The question STEM is asking you to identify an assumption that underlies the study. In other words, you have to find an assumption that the researchers made to arrive at this hypothesis. This assumption would be that the operational definition of positive and negative consequences in behavior are the same in the previous SDT studies and the current study. Are we good to move on to question 2? Okay. So what did you guys get for this question? Please put an asterisk if you want to explain your answer. Okay, Brian, why do you say C?
Because as the question, the first part of the question being referred to the table 1, this asking you to look at table 1, and you will basically find the correlation of the high physiological well-being would be most significant high on which number or most significant low on which number. And I was initially looking for integrated regulation, but that does not have the in choice. So I basically just look at the one with the most negative value, which is the external regulation. Low on external regulation.
Low. Do you mean low A motivation?
Oh, yes, a motivation.
Okay. Yeah, so for this question, you just have to identify your correlation. So choice A is incorrect because the correlation between a high psychological well-being and introjection regulation score is negative. So a high well-being score would lead to a low introjected regulation score. The same thing goes with choice B. There's a negative correlation between A motivation and psychological well-being. So choice C is also wrong because psychological well-being and integrated regulation have a relatively strong positive correlation, 0.29. So it would be high and high. So choice C is our answer. A high psychological well-being score would pair with a low A motivation score. And what did you guys get for question 3? All right, so for this question, the correct answer is D. You don't have to look at table 1 to answer this question. So someone ostracizing another group member for going against the group norm is a negative consequence of social identity. The passage stated that negative consequences of social identity are likely to be brought on by non-self-determined motivations, which include A motivation, external regulation, and introjected regulation. So a high introjected regulation score could lead to this negative social identity consequence. Choice A is wrong because identity strength is not an SDT motivation type. Choice B is wrong because external regulation is a non-self-determined motivation, so it would have to be high for the answer to be correct. And choice C is wrong because integrated regulation is a self-determined motivation, which leads to positive social identity consequences. Does that make sense?
You say the choice B is not correct because this is SDT.
So choice B, okay, so in the question stem, the person is trying to ostracize another member. That's a negative behavior. And like the passage states, negative behaviors are likely to be brought on by non-self-determined motivations. So choice B, external regulation, is a non-self-determined motivation type. So since this person is displaying a negative behavior, they are likely to have a high external regulation score, not a low external regulation score.
I see. Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Okay. And yeah, so you should be low. All right. And what did you guys get for question 4? Yeah, Crystal, you are correct. The correct answer is A. So variance means how deviated the score is from the mean. In the study, the researchers measured the correlation between SDT motivation types and positive/negative consequences of social identity. They do not want to measure the correlation between identity strength and positive negative consequences of social identity. So in order to ensure that they are measuring SDT motivation types, they have to determine the degree of variance associated with identity strength before deciding that the variance is associated with motivation types, not identity strength. So A is our answer and C is out. In other words, if the variance of the variables in the study was associated mostly with identity strength instead of SDT motivation types, the correlation between SDT motivation types and the consequences of social identity would be ambiguous. So choice B is wrong because integrated regulation is a motivation type that the study is measuring for a correlation. And choice D is wrong because in-group bias is a negative consequence that they're measuring. Does that make sense? Okay. So last question. What did you guys get? Okay, so for this question, all right. So Linda has a high score on the external regulation items, which is a non-self-determined motivation type, meaning that she will likely display negative consequences of social identity. Instead of acknowledging that the other school is better at soccer because their players are more well-trained or the coach is much better, she will attribute the other school's win to situational factors, like maybe her school's team wasn't used to the turf, but the other team was. Ultimate attribution error is defined as the tendency to attribute an outgroup's positive performance to situational factors rather than talent, and their negative performance to personal weaknesses. So choice C is our answer. Choice A is wrong because external regulation is positively correlated with identity quality. And choice D is wrong because the self-serving bias refers to our tendency to attribute our success as individuals, not as a group, to internal factors. And choice B is wrong because external regulation would be correlated with in-group bias, not out-group bias. Does that make sense? Yeah, it was pretty tricky. Okay, so I will switch it over to Sim.
Okay, thank you, Ashley. Can you guys see the screen? How did you guys find this CARS passage? Hard, okay. Easy, okay, hard to understand, cool. Okay, let's go over it then. Do you guys have any questions on the passage itself? Okay, I can go over the passage a little bit if we didn't understand it. So we're talking about the common law in England and how it's affected the colonies, except for Connecticut. It did not affect Connecticut. And then we are introduced to Thomas Jefferson, and he had some consideration in it. And the colonies adopted some sort of the laws of England and made it their own. And then the colonists claimed that right to modify that legislation. So they modified their common law of England And it was used, ironically, to restrict women's rights. So that's what they're doing by modifying the legislation and the common law. But the common law did vary from colony to colony. So every colony might have had a different version of it. So they give you examples by like Virginia was something else, Pennsylvania had another one, and Georgia also had a different one. So they're giving you examples of very different modifications in the common law. So Virginia's adopted common law in regards to women's rights was more conservative than Georgia's, and Georgia's also made it more conservative later. So we're talking about how it was different, but it was still used to be more conservative towards women's rights. And then we are introduced to the common law of England as given by William Blackstone. And his version also was not favorable towards women, but the states made it worse. So that's why his version was introduced. And we're talking now here about Jefferson and how he took that legislation and they considered it while taking it, applying it to each state, and then that's how it was affected. Does anyone have any questions about what the passage was trying to say? Okay, we can go on to the questions then. So does the author explain the statement the early colonists claimed and exercised the right to modify the rules of common law? What do you guys think? Okay, so let's find this statement. So where did he talk about the early colonists claimed and exercised the right to modify the rules of common law? So that's something we talked about in this paragraph, in the second one. And how did the author explain that statement? So the early colonists claimed and exercised the right to modify by legislation of their own the rules of that law and to fit it to their own needs and conditions. And then we have a quote by Jefferson to support that the common laws were adopted and they were made, either they were added to or they were altered. So that's what is supporting this statement. So we want to look for an answer that best supports that. So no is out because the author does explain that statement. He doesn't really demonstrate the differences between the American and English common law, so that is out as well. Okay, so would it be better to say he discusses different states and how they modified their laws, or would it say the historical analysis of Thomas Jefferson? Okay, yeah, so Thomas Jefferson was mentioned in this paragraph to support that statement, and that's really the only thing we have to explain that right there. So D would be the better answer than C. Because although we do go on to talk about how different states modify their laws, mostly in the third paragraph, that builds on this, it adds to that, but it doesn't explain the statement. And Thomas Jefferson is explaining that statement better than just giving examples. Does that make sense? Okay, great. Question 2, the passage suggests that the English common law provided what? Okay, so it didn't really give explanations for why men were superior to women. And we didn't talk about uniting against England. So make sure to not bring any outside knowledge into this. Okay, so would it be a basis for the laws or the democracy? And obviously we really talked about how the laws were altered, so this would be the best answer. We didn't really talk about democracy in the early America. Okay, question 3. So why is William Blackstone's influence mentioned in this paragraph or this passage? Okay, great. So was it because the states were rebellious even before the revolution? If you pick that, you're bringing outside knowledge into it, so you don't want to go with that. Common law was originally an English invention. This is true, but that's not why William Blackstone is mentioned. Okay, gender equality was not a priority for early America. Okay, that seems okay, as we did discuss a lot about the women's rights. And there was originally just one version of common law. This is also not what his references was implied for. It was implied for that the common law was expounded by him, and his version was not favorable towards women either. So that's kind of what it's trying to say, that his version wasn't favorable, and then the states took that and made it even worse. So that would be the best answer, saying gender equality was not a priority. Any questions? Okay, number 4. What do you guys think about this? So if Connecticut was the only state to refuse the English common law, what would this impact? Okay, so we have C and D. Okay, let's look at those. A and B doesn't really support these because this doesn't challenge the notion that the common law was used by most of the early United States. That's not challenging it. And it's also not challenging that it differed. So if Connecticut did not use the common law because of how it discriminated against women, what can we say? Can we say that the different states felt like they would modify the common law if Connecticut rejected it or refused it? So this is difficult because Connecticut did not modify the common law. They just rejected it. They're not a part of it. So it says the common law has been in effect except for Connecticut. So if they're not even using the common law, they're not modifying it. So C would be the best answer. Okay, question 5. So the author's analysis of how modifications to common law diminish the rights of women. What do you guys think? B and D. Okay, great. So we didn't really talk about legislators and the reasons to limit women's rights, so we can cross that off. And for C, English common law could have been more gender neutral. That's not really, if we're modifying it to diminish the rights of women, that's not really saying that we would make them more gender neutral. So we would cross it off as well. Between B and D, does anyone want to say why they would pick B or why they would pick D?
I was not sure of B because if the common law is being discriminated against a woman, then I think there would be probably reasonable to assume that woman doesn't have a saying in their law. Since if they do have a saying in the law, they will not allow the discrimination.
Okay. Right, so we're trying to find the assumption. So how modifications to the common law diminish the rights of women rests on the assumption that what? So if they already have little political influence, it's more of a cause to diminish their rights, right? So it's not saying that. Also, okay, first we didn't discuss women's political power in the passage, so it's really hard to say that. But if we are talking about women's discrimination, that could be a cause, or that could be a result of the common law. So if we're diminishing their rights, they're going to have little political influence. So this is kind of the cause and effect, but we're trying to find the assumption. We're trying to find something that already exists. Whereas B is talking about something that would happen after the rights of women would be diminished. Does that make more sense?
But could the cause and effect being both together, kind of being reciprocal in this case?
Sorry, I'm just trying to think of how to word it. Okay, let me try to explain D first and then come back to B. So if we're saying that some aspects of common law were gender specific, that would also make sense, because if we're having laws and we're not favoring them toward women, that means we're not gender neutral. We are being gender specific and making them not favorable towards women. So then that makes more sense to say that, because if we're reducing women's rights in the laws, that makes sense that common law had some things about women already in there. Otherwise, we would have to add that in there. Does that make sense, Brian?
Yes, this thinking is more straightforward. Indeed.
Okay. Okay, cool. I'm not sure how to explain that any better, but we can talk about it after if it doesn't make sense. Okay, I'm going to give out the next passage now. We'll give you guys some time to do that and we'll go over it then. Okay, you guys can start. Let us know in the chat once you're done. Ashley, do you want to start going over the passage?
Yes. Okay, let me share my screen for a second. Okay. So, did you guys find this passage easy, medium, hard? Easy to medium? Okay. So, these are my highlights, again, very minimal. The passage starts by telling you about this outbreak that started in 1993 in the United States. It tells you the symptoms that the patients experienced. I didn't highlight this because I didn't think it was too important. I saw the word flu-like and I already have everything that I need to know about the symptoms. But if a passage is telling you specific symptoms like memory loss or increased urination, symptoms like these that are very characteristics of certain diseases like Alzheimer's or diabetes, then I would highlight that like those symptoms. But flu-like is very vague, so that's why I just didn't highlight it. I highlighted pulmonary function because this is what was measured in the patients. From this, we can tell that this is a respiratory disease. I thought that the fact that those who treated the patients did not get sick was pretty interesting, just because it tells us that the disease is not transmittable by air, which could tell us a little bit more about the pathogen. So the experiments were done to identify the pathogen, whether it's a virus, a bacteria, fungi, whatever. In experiments 1, 2, and 3, I highlighted the results of the experiment because that's what I want to pay the most attention to. So as a fun fact, which you don't need to know, a hantavirus is a type of virus that is spread by rodents and can cause flu-like symptoms. When humans come into contact with the urine/saliva feces of an infected mouse, they can get infected, but the mouse does not get sick. So I thought that was pretty cool. All right, so what did you guys get for question 1? No. All right, so the correct answer is C. If we look at figure 1, we can see that the pulmonary function decreased rapidly for all patients, and it took them like 5 or 6 days to return to normal, and it was a pretty slow recovery. So option A is wrong. Less than 1/2 of normal would be around like 200 here, like around this area on the y-axis. We can see that for only 4 days, the pulmonary function was below 200. So choice B is wrong. Pulmonary function continued to decline on day 3 for patient 1. Yeah, stopped declining on day 4 for patient 2 and patient 3. Sorry, oh my God. So pulmonary function continued to decline on day 3 for patient 1. It stopped declining on day 4 for patient 2, and patient 3 had a decline on day 5. And choice D is wrong. It was a rapid decline and a slower recovery. Does that make sense?
So the B is wrong because on the day 4, patient 3 is not declined yet.
Right. So for patient 1, the pulmonary function declined on day 3, and on day 4, it stopped declining. For patient 2, it declined on it stopped declining on day 4. So this statement, choice B, is only applicable to patient 2. And for patient 3, the pulmonary function continued to decline on day 5. Okay. So what did you guys get for the second question? Yeah, so all of you are correct. The correct answer is B. In the experiment, the researchers used patient sera that had the unknown hantavirus and antibodies to this unknown hantavirus. They found that a positive immunologic reaction occurred, meaning that the respiratory patient's antibodies attacked the known hantavirus that causes kidney disease. The only way this could occur is if the epitope of the kidney hantavirus and the respiratory hantavirus are very similar, that they can be recognized by the same antibodies. So remember that the epitope is the region on an antigen that is recognized by the antibody. So option A is wrong because there is no way that the respiratory patients synthesized antibodies specific to the kidney disease hantavirus, since it was nowhere mentioned that they were exposed to the kidney disease hantavirus. Option C is wrong. The patient's sera did not react with kidney proteins, only the hantavirus that causes kidney disease. And option D is wrong. So yes, the serum did contain the unknown hantavirus, but the reaction was seen when the serum was mixed with the kidney disease hantavirus. Remember that the experiment was performed to see what antigens the antibodies would react to. Okay. And what did you guys get for question 3? Okay, so for this one, the correct answer is B. The passage states that hybridization occurs when nucleic acid strands base pair with each other. In order to base pair with each other, the sequences have to be complementary to one another. So as you can see in this example in the diagram, you have the 5' going this way and then the 3' strand in the other side. So choice A is wrong because identical DNA strands do not hybridize with each other since they're identical. They have to be complementary for them to base pair. And choice C is wrong because the passage doesn't state that hybridization occurs between RNA and enzymes, only between complementary strands of DNA. And choice D is wrong because DNA does not hybridize with enzymes. Nucleic acids can only hybridize with each other if they are complementary. Does that make sense? Okay. And what did you guys get for this question? Yeah, so for this question, the correct answer is A. In order to answer this question, we have to put together the results of experiments 1 and 2. So experiment 1 showed us that the patient's sera, which contained antibodies to the hantavirus, reacted with a known hantavirus that causes kidney disease. So this is already telling us that the unknown pathogen is most likely going to be a type of hantavirus. The second experiment showed us that nucleic acid strands of known hantaviruses hybridize with the patient's sera. And the only way this could occur is if the nucleic strands of the known hantaviruses and the nucleic strands of the unknown pathogen in the patient's sera were complementary, indicating that the unknown pathogen is a hantavirus since it hybridized with another known hantavirus. Option B is incorrect. Any pathogen type can infect lung endothelium. This isn't really telling us anything about whether the pathogen is a hantavirus or a bacteria or a fungi. Option C is wrong. The known hantavirus causes kidney disease. The new virus causes pulmonary disease. Option D is wrong just because experiment 3 showed that it wasn't a bacteria that infected the lung epithelial cells, doesn't automatically prove that the new pathogen is a hantavirus. Does that make sense? Okay. And what did you guys get for question 5? Yeah, and if you guys want to explain, you can also put the asterisk. All right, so you guys are correct. The correct answer is, okay, yeah, Brian, why did you get C?
I think the definition of reservoir is basically the animal organism that will cultivate the virus inside of their body. And the hantavirus is known for the related to the mouse and the rat, and is saying this in the United States and the European is the vole. So therefore, I would assume the control for transmission and elimination would be most likely be a mouse.
Yes. Yeah, exactly. So the correct answer is C. We are looking for an animal that is closely related to a vole, since the hantaviruses have similar genetic material, which determines how they are transmitted. So of all the options, the animal most closely related to a vole is a mouse. You can see pictures of them here. They're incredibly cute. On the left, we have a vole, and on the right, we have a mouse. Okay. So what did you guys get for, I know, I love them. They're so cute. So what did you guys get for the last question? Yes, you guys are exactly right. Choice C is the correct answer, and it is based on experiment 3. Experiment 3 showed us that the anti-pathogen antibodies were able to bind to the capillary walls in patients' lung tissues, meaning that these antibodies were bound to the hantavirus in the capillary walls, or the capillary endothelium in the lungs. So option A is wrong. We know nothing about the site of viral replication from the experiments. Option B is wrong. We can't conclude that viral DNA was in the lung capillary, since we were only told that viral nucleic acid was found in the lungs. And option D is wrong. We weren't told anything about the alveoli, just that the antibodies bound to the capillary walls just that the antibodies were bound to the capillary walls in the patient's lung tissues. Does anyone have any questions about this passage? All right, so I'll pass it over to Sim. Just the capillaries in your lungs. This is what it looks like a little capillary, and the endothelium is like the cells lining the capillary. So this is where you would find like the hantavirus. Okay, any other questions? All right.
Okay, cool. So how did you guys find these physics discrete questions? For lack of time, I'm just going to go over them, and just stop me if you guys have any questions. So what did you guys get for question number 1? Okay, yep, great job. So you need to remember this equation using the potential energy is equal to mgh, which is the mass with the gravity and the height. So we need to find the height. So we solve for h just by rearranging the formula, and then you plug in the numbers. I rounded 570 to around 600, and that's going to be around 3. And the best answer would be around B. What about question 2? What did you guys get for question 2? Okay, yeah, so first we have the voltage given and the power, and we want to find the coulombs of charge. So we do use the P is equal to IV equation. And we do need to convert it to seconds. So you need the formula power is equal to voltage times current. The voltage is 6 volts, 27 watts is the power. And then we're gonna need to convert watts into the amps. So we're gonna get current is equal to the power divided by voltage, which gives us 4.5 amps. And then we need to convert that hours into seconds. So 4.5 times 3,600 is 16,200 coulombs. And I just put these chart up. So these are the equations you guys should know. And this is like a triangle chart that you can see to figure out the formula if you don't want to memorize them. Does anyone have any questions? Nope. Okay. Question 3. What did you guys get for this? And can we use the energy equation? I think you can because you end up dividing by the same thing. Did you get 4.5 amps? I think you can use that equation as well. Okay, going back to this. Yeah, so they give you the blood pressure. So you do have to know that the first one is the systolic and 80 is the diastolic, and then you just plug it into this equation and you get 100. So make sure you know how to read the blood pressure reading. Okay. What about this one? Okay, so what direction would the magnetic field produced by the moving electron? What would be the direction? And it's moving, the electron is moving out of the page. So if it's moving out of the page, it's coming towards us. And you guys need to remember how to do the right-hand rule with the magnetic field. So this is kind of how you use this. So the current is moving into the page and the electron's moving out of the page. So we use a right-hand rule where the thumb is the current and your fingers point in the direction of the magnetic field. So if our thumb is into the page, then you're going to curl your fingers towards you, and because the current is moving into the page, your fingers are curling clockwise. So that means the magnetic field is also going in the clockwise direction. If these types of questions are difficult, I would suggest watching a few videos. I can also link them. It's kind of hard to explain it, but I would recommend just watching a few videos of the problems and following along and doing the hand motions that can help you do the right hand rule better. Okay, last question. For this one, you guys want to remember the formula, which is Q is equal to MC delta T. And by using that formula, everything is given to us. The specific heat is 4.2, which is C. The mass is also given to us, 5 kilograms. Delta T would be just 50 minus 20, which is 30. And then we plug it into the formula. So that would give us around 630. Does anyone have any questions on anything we discussed today?
And I have a quick question on the car question previously.
Mhm.
Sometimes I feel like the logic can. Sometimes I feel like it's more like opinion.
Okay,
Like
do you have
for
a
that
specific?
question, for that question in specific, they were talking about like the choice. That's not the correct. Not the answer is they saying the female. They can due to the discriminatory law that the female is not in control with in like a contribution to the law, common law. But I was thinking like this can actually be either way though.
Which question was that?
And I think it's the fourth question. Like which one is implied by the common law?
Okay.
Hold on. I think it's the previous one, sorry.
Okay. This one?
Hold on. Let me check mine. Question 5, last question.
Okay. So are you confused why it's not B?
I know D is correct because D is directly being mentioned how they could be more friendly, they can be more favorable to the woman. And in the end of paragraph 2, they say this used to restrict woman right. But I feel if it's talking about the assumption, then this should not be directly made in the passage. And therefore, I also think B will be correct.
Well, if you're making the assumption women had little political influence in early America, if they already had little political influence, why are you diminishing more rights? That doesn't also make sense.
So you say B is because B is not assumption?
I'm trying to say, like, if this is assumption, women had little political influence, then why are they diminishing more rights? It doesn't make sense to do that, right?
Oh, I see. It's more like larger thing, I think. Okay, thank you.
Okay. Does anyone have any other questions on the passage, or not the passage, but the discrete questions we just discussed? Oh, okay. Let me go back to that question. Yeah, sorry. So for that question, you're going to have to use power is equal to voltage times current, because those are the 3 given to you. Yeah. Does this make sense?
Yeah, but if you multiply watt per hour, that's the energy. So I thought energy is equal to U. So when you do like power is equal to energy over time, and when you try to find the energy, you do power times time. So the unit is equal to energy. So that confused me. Do you understand what I'm saying?
I think so, but yeah, I think you're going to just have to use this formula for this case, because it's more directly. I'm not sure if the power converted to energy is the same thing with that formula. Does that make sense? Are you trying to use power is equal to work over time? Yeah, I don't think that would equate to this equation over here, and that's why you're getting a different answer. Okay, I can take a look at it again, but I'm pretty sure you have to use the watts because the watt is the power unit. So we would definitely want to use this formula, and voltage is for the volt. And we're getting the coulombs of charge, which is in current. So we want to definitely use this direct formula. I think it also might have to do with units that if we don't convert it right, we probably won't end up with the right answer. And don't forget to convert the hours into seconds. Okay. Okay, do you guys have any other questions? If not, thank you so much for coming to our session today. You can email us back if you have any questions, and yeah, thank you so much. And if you're able to, please make a donation to MCAT 101. That's kind of how we use all our funds towards our organization to help pay for all the fees and stuff. So thank you.